Hello, my name is Andrew Delamere. I'm a Specialist Solutions Architect for IoT for AWS. Welcome to this video, this how-to video on AWS Systems Manager Agent for Greengrass version 2.0. What we're going to be talking about in this video is installing SSM Agent on Greengrass, looking at SSM itself briefly, and understanding some of the ways that you can use SSM Agent to manage your large fleet of Greengrass devices. Now, there's all sorts of things you can do with that. So I'm going to start with what is Systems Manager a little bit and say what is it trying to be and what is it doing. Then I'm going to install and run Systems Manager. And then we're briefly going to touch on further reading, which is, I guess, important for if you wanted to try this yourselves. Now, let's move along. So, if we look at where we are with Systems Manager is a large collection of different products and services that AWS has accrued over time. We've built a lot of different bits and pieces and added them to the service. So we've got things from operations management, which takes CloudWatch metrics and works out things like KPI monitoring and management, incident management, runbooks and playbooks. What happens when devices go into a marginalized or down state? How do you recover from that? Who gets called and why? And we've got an explorer on that as well, which shows you things that have happened. So for example, if I click on that, we can definitely see that certain things are happening. So currently I've got an incident which is unresolved in my account, and then I've got an Apache association which is looking at non-compliant devices. So I've got one device which is non-compliant right now, and then I can do instances, search for instances via AMI. I've then got an application manager. Now, application managers are super important if you've got large holistic estates of devices which are running the same software. And for example, if you've got a large container fleet and it's clustering all of its stack using the same application on the back end, so it might be a web service, a portal, a CMS system, or even something a lot more technical like bits and pieces of an SAP solution. So you've got your clusters and things there. Now, moving down, we've got change management, and this is the base of ITSM principles, where we've got a brand new change manager, where you can make changes to architectures and software and stacks, and then automate the rollout of that a little bit. And it uses Ansible playbooks, so you can roll out that over time. You could either run it with a blue, green, or canary environments, or you can run it in maintenance windows as a centralized update, which is kind of cool. And you can then have a change calendar for certain days when things aren't supposed to happen, and other days when they are. And then the bottom here, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit today, is Fleet Manager. Now, Fleet Manager is slightly new for 2022. We've updated it from reInvent. And it allows you the chance of managing your node fleet in one big stack, which is super cool. So I've got a whole bunch of devices running here. They've all got SSM Agent on them. And I've got various different devices running. Some of them are IoT devices, some of them are EC2s, some are even Cloud9 instances from the Cloud9 service. So that's kind of cool as well. So that's much how Fleet Manager works. But what we need to do next is I'm going to start from scratch and install a new client on my Jetson Nano. So let's start with that. So the first thing I need to do is I've just reinstalled one of my Jetson Nanos. Jetson Nano is a really good IoT device. It's really powerful. You can do machine learning at the edge with it, run multiple containers. I've got the 4 gig ones. And I've called it George Jetson. As you know, I mean, if for all those who know who George Jetson was, he was a cartoon character from the 60s and 70s. Now, as you can see, it's running Tegra, and it's running 18.04. So there's nothing special going on with this device. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look here, and I'm going to make a Greengrass directory. Now, Greengrass V2, which is what we're going to install today, doesn't need a directory. Greengrass V1, if you're familiar with it, needed to sit in /greengrass. But I'm going to install that in /greengrass as well, because it makes sense to me from coming from a Greengrass V1 environment. So I'm going to make a directory called Greengrass. Here we go. All right, and now what I need to do next is I need to get the software. So, as we know, for those that are familiar with Greengrass in its edge processing capability, what Greengrass actually does is it allows you to deploy software components from the cloud, from the console, or from the cloud, either that be containers, Lambda, or inference, or a mixture of those things, and also components which you've written yourself, which aren't necessarily any of those things. We've written a whole bunch of components around as well. As you can see, we've written a whole bunch of public components for everything from shadow management, object detection and KVS, IoT Outlook for Vision, Edge Agent, loads and loads of different things, secure tunneling, all good stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new Greengrass core, and I'm going to call it George Jetson. Right, there we go. I'm going to select an existing group. I think I've got a George Jetson group. I have got a George Jetson group. Now what I need to do is install the software. Now, AWS credentials are important on the device, so it can actually go and get all the different bits and pieces it needs to operate. I've added credentials onto my device already just now with AWS Configure. But you can also export as environment variables your own keys, access keys, and a token, and creating a user to deploy your Greengrass nodes that is specifically using this and can use session tokens, which only last for about an hour, is really useful. Okay, so we're going to curl this software. We're going to go and grab it. There we go. So it's getting the latest Greengrass, which is 2.5.3 from the cloud, from our CloudFront installation. Then all we need to then do is, if you'll notice here, it's already set up the names of things: George Jetson Group, all of those different bits of us, and it's actually provisioned it already from a command line syntax perspective. So Greengrass, you can actually run it from the edge inwards, or you can run it from the console, as I'm showing here. But what it's actually doing is deploying the device and allowing it to connect. So it'll then go through, configure, run up the Java virtual machine, install all the components, register all the different bits and bobs. As you can see, it's using my George Jetson group. Registering the TES role policy for the IT thing, which it needs, and then we are ready to go. I mean, it's really ready and it's nearly there, and we can have a look to see when it registers. And when it's registered, as you can see, it has actually registered there. Give it a couple of seconds to talk to IT Core. Talk amongst yourselves. There we go. So George Jetson is now ready. He is a basic device, and what we need to do now is we need to install SSM agent before we can install any other components, so we can manage him and see what he's up to. Now, to get that done, what we need to do is we need to first of all create a deployment. Now, if we go to deployments, there we go. We can create a deployment, and we can call it anything we like. We can call it George Deploy, like that. George Jetson. Yeah, it was George Jetson, wasn't it? It was George Jetson. There we go. All one word. Ooh. Can't spell. All right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to click next. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look for a component. So we want to find, out of all of these, Systems Manager Agent. We're going to click Next. Now what we need to do next is we need to configure it. Now Systems Manager Agent needs some STS policy, which is a secure token service. So it can actually talk to SSM endpoints from sitting on-prem, so from its own Greengrass node. And so it's really quite important that it has that STS token authorization. So it just basically exchanges a token, allows it to talk, and it just keeps changing tokens. For that, we need to create a role. Now, our roles, if we go into our roles here, our roles, SSM, I've created a role just now, service role, there it is, and it's very simple. So what we actually need is we just need to show that we've got, it goes to SSM, it's an STS assume role, it's also all very simple, and the permissions tied to it is the SSM managed service instant call role, which is an AWS managed policy. So what we've done is we've said, in order to get to SSM, bind a token, and then you can go and talk to that to that policy, which allows you to do all those good things, in effect. So let's bind that in. Let's get it going. And what we need to be able to do with that is we go boom. So what I've done is I've taken the default configuration, as you can see here. So all components have a default configuration which you can use as a framework to put your information into. All I've done is I've added that SSM service role, and then I've added a couple of keys, a couple of tags. All right, well, one tag, which is the owner, which is AWS. Now I can search on that tag later in SSM, which is useful. I've also added here override existing registration because I've registered this device a couple of times with SSM, and I want it to make sure that it still keeps going, and it creates a new device. Now, when you're doing a new one, you don't need to do that. Now, what I'm going to do now is we're going to leave all that blank. We don't actually need that to get it working. I'm going to go through. There we go, and then I'm going to click deploy. Okay, so what we then need to do is go back to our Greengrass node. Let's go into V2 and let's go into logs. Now what we should see is the Greengrass log. There we go. It should show us what it's doing, and it should say, look, it's got System Manager Agent, it's starting to prepare that package. Okay, so what we should have done is it should have given us a new log in a second. It will give us a brand new log, which will be the Systems Manager log. There it is. And what that'll do is it will first of all look to see what's available on the host, if there's anything pre-installed. And then what it will do is it will install the token agent, which you need to actually register for an SSM token. Then it will download the SSM agent itself via a snap. So SSM agent on Ubuntu and it uses snap to run its agent, which is a little container. And then once it's done that, it'll then bind that and then report back that it's complete and allow the agent to communicate via Greengrass to SSM. All sounds fairly easy. Let's see how it goes. Okay. Now, what we should see now is we should see George Jetson is healthy. He's online. He's got his Systems Manager Agent running. And what we see now is we see System Manager Agent functions in George Jetson, which is kind of cool. Okay, so what have we got there? Now, if we go to Systems Manager and we and we click on that, we've got 10 nodes. And here's our George Jetson device. There it is. Owner, AWS. Okay. Now there's a few things we can do there. We can actually talk to the device. We can execute a run command. So for example, if we click on a run command, there are a lot of run commands, but what we're going to do is we're going to run a very simple one for today's demonstration. So this allows us to run shell script commands. So I can do, so this is a brand new Jetson Nano installation. I can do apt update -y, then I can do apt upgrade -y. Okay, so I can run that. I can then look for a timeout on it. So I just make sure it doesn't. And then what I can do is I can choose nodes manually, and it's already done. Or I can specify tags. So if I've got tags which I've installed for my Greengrass nodes, which adhere to a cost code, or they adhere to a specific project or a specific region, I can use those tags to actually specify the resources I need. But in this case, we're just going to select one device. I can then select output options. I can say, tell me when this is completed, so I can then have a Lambda that's combing an S3 bucket to say what's actually happened as an outcome of this and when did it happen. Or I can send an SNS notification to a specific topic if I want to say something is completed. So that's now going to start. It's going to run for a while, and it's going to complete. So let's leave that running. Now the next thing I can do, which is really kind of cool, is I can terminal the device. Now, if I go into George Jetson here, and I can, if I go to temp, mkdir, hello, Andrew. Oh no, actually touch it. Touch. Hello, Andrew. Okay. All right. Let's choose bash. There we go. There we go. So I can actually terminal all my consoles. So this is really useful if you're installing a large node in a, if it's doing managing backnet for a shopping center, or if they're doing a large industrial process. You can actually get to your device when the installer's there and actually check that it's doing everything it's supposed to do, and you can check /dev and say, what devices are supposed to be showing up when they're showing up. So that's pretty useful from a perspective of a systems manager as well. So what you will notice about this interaction, either it's secured via Greengrass, via the console. But to get the performance counters that we see here, and to look at the processes, users and groups, and the file system types, you actually need to run a more secure connection with KMS. So the first thing we need to do is we need to look at the policy. Now, let's first of all go to our managed keys, right? So first of all, what you need to do is generate a key, okay? So I've generated a key here, which I'm going to destroy after this session. And that key needs to be central to your device policy. Now, we talked about device policy before, and we talked about IAM. But if we go back to our IAM role, in order to get secured connection working, we need to go back to our role, SSM service policy. Oh, I'm sorry, there's role, apologies. And then what we actually need to then do is we need to add a data access policy as an inline policy. So you need to create an inline policy called data access policy. Let's look at the JSON for that. And what we're doing is we're saying, I want to receive control channel messages backwards and forwards via the STS token and via encryption, because it goes via S3. And I need to be able to decrypt the message as it comes off so I can get statistics out of it. Now, it's using my key to do that. Yeah. So if we go back to the system, what you would get if you tried to click on that is you would get the unable to start this session, KMS encryption must be enabled, right? So we go to system preferences. We edit it. So what we need to do is we need to enable KMS encryption. As you can see here, I've enabled KMS encryption. I've got my key from the console, which we saw before. We can enable things like S3 logging and CloudWatch logging here if we want to. So there you go. So that's now encrypted. So now if we go back to Fleet Manager and we go back to our device, George Jetson, and then we go back to performance counters, we should find that we're getting performance statistics out of the device. So we can actually, for each device, work out what it's doing. We can also look at processes. We can look at file system. Okay, there we go. We can look at the directory structure. We can create new directories. And we can also look at users. All right. The last thing that happens here, which is really useful, is we've encrypted the state using the KMS key for our session now. There we go. Hello, Andrew. Integrating the KMS. So there ends my demonstration of getting Fleet Manager agent running on a Greengrass node. As you can see, it's fairly comprehensive and it allows you to do quite a lot of things. Now, part of me talking to you about this is that we have a general Greengrass V2 workshop which you can follow and learn more about what Greengrass is and does and how it helps your business with edge processing of data into the cloud. We have an SSM workshop from the SSM team, which is very good. It allows you to go through some of those options we've seen today and get more detail on it. And then the last one is we have an IoT basics workshop, which if you're not quite sure about where Greengrass fits and how it fits and managing it is something you really want to kind of get involved in, but you're not quite sure how it all works, perhaps choose that. So thank you very much for your time. I'm Andrew Delamere, adelamere@amazon.com if you've got any questions. You have a good day now.